Many sports fans from around the world are still in mourning following the tragic helicopter crash in California, which claimed the lives of former NBA All-Star Kobe Bryant, his 13-year-old daughter Gigi, also 56-year-old baseball coach John Altobelli, his wife Carrie, and their daughter Alyssa. Joining me now to discuss the tragedy in further detail is journalist Lisa Daftari, joining me from Los Angeles. Lisa, do we know exactly what caused the crash?
You know, it seems like there was a fire, and from what I've heard, because I was out of town, but here in Los Angeles, it was a foggy morning when this crash occurred. They could not contain the fire, or they weren't able to make the emergency landing that they wanted to, and they crashed into a hillside. Um, Obviously, this is incredibly tragic. It's incredibly tragic because, you know, Kobe Bryant was an iconic sports figure, a role model to so many people, especially here in Los Angeles, but I know the reverberations were felt around the world. I have, you know, followers who commented from all over the Middle East, even commenting on how much they looked up to Kobe Bryant. And as you said, this wasn't just a tragedy, you know, taking the life of a sports icon, but it was his daughter and the others who were on board, a total of 9 people. And I said to my family yesterday, I said, imagine how excited these other individuals were to be in Kobe Bryant's helicopter. What a ride of a lifetime, or experience of a lifetime, going to a simple teenager's basketball game. That's where he was going to coach and to watch his daughter and the other girls on board play basketball. Just a reminder, I know Kobe Bryant had such a legacy. He left behind such a legacy, and he was so incredible at the game of basketball. But what I kept saying yesterday is that his life had just begun, or at least the meaningful, impactful part of his life, where he would take the success, the fame, the money, the resources that he had to truly make a difference in the lives of young people, in the lives of upcoming athletes, in the lives of inner city children who don't have the opportunities. And you know, that's why this is so tragic. I know so many people, there's so many perspectives, I should say, and so many people mourn this in different ways, looking at it as a parent losing a child, and thinking of Kobe's wife losing his daughter, looking at an entire family wiped out, looking at it as a sports icon whose life was cut short. I mean, so many memories that people here, I know in Los Angeles, have of the Lakers, and Kobe was the Lakers, and is the Lakers, I should say. I just heard that the game between the Clippers and the Lakers that was supposed to take place has now been postponed, out of respect for the Los Angeles teams, out of respect for the Los Angeles community. And I know that this is going to take a while. I think so many people had a very difficult time even, you know, absorbing the news. That was quite a tragic day here, and they continue to mourn him as crowds gather at Staples Center in downtown Los Angeles, and people talk about the legacy that he left behind.
Yeah, I had the chance to see Kobe Bryant take on the Memphis Grizz like 17, 18 years ago. He scored 63 points that game at Staples Center. I was there to see it. It was an incredible achievement, and yeah, may he rest in peace. He was just an incredible basketball player and an icon, like you said, in the basketball community. Lisa, China is now counting 2,700 cases, including over 80 deaths from the coronavirus. We've had 2 confirmed cases here in Canada and Toronto, and now you've had 5 confirmed cases in the United States. Will this become another SARS?
Yeah, this is quite scary, and you know, it's making its impact everywhere because the symptoms are so silent, and it seems like people are losing their lives. 80 people lost their lives in the community in which it originated. It seems like it came from livestock. That's where the virus originated. But again, people have already traveled out of Wuhan, the Chinese province where this began. And it's going to take a while before this can be contained. Again, where we spoke about this last time, you and Hal, about how, you know, whenever there's an when airplanes are available, diseases will spread, and they will spread quickly to different continents. And you know, here in the United States, they're trying their best to contain the individuals who have been flagged for the virus. And I know in Canada you have the same issue, but the goal now is to sequester those who are, who are infected, to not allow them to travel, to check people at airports, to do our due diligence to stop this disease from spreading any further.
Turkey is searching for more people from the recent devastating earthquake which killed 38 people. Lisa, Turkey's Erdogan hits back at criticism that his country is not earthquake ready.
Well, that's what it appears to be. This was in eastern Turkey where the infrastructure perhaps is not as prepared for this type of an earthquake. It was a very strong earthquake. I believe it was a 6.8 magnitude, which is quite a significant tremor. And when you have that kind of destruction, you have a high casualty number, and this is what happened here. We're almost at 40 people. And the search continues for many that are missing. So, of course, that number will climb. And, of course, Erdogan is receiving the criticism that, when you have money to pour into regional activities and be involved in Libya and Syria and to be involved in the deaths of Kurdish people and to make that your priority, well, you have to take care of your own civilians back at home and perhaps have infrastructures that won't lend themselves to deaths the way that this earthquake did. So he is facing that criticism for that reason. But of course, our prayers, our thoughts are with the people of Turkey, those communities and those families that were affected by the earthquake. And we hope that people can be found alive and be connected with their families.
The U.S. Embassy dining hall in Baghdad was hit by a rocket. Officials say there were no immediate reports of injuries, so that's the good news.
Yes, the good news. But, as soon as this news broke, I think everyone thought the same thing. Is this another attack from the Iranian government? Will this lead to war, as everyone is worried about? And on the edge of our seats here, thinking, will this be the strike that leads to war, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago with the exchange of missile fire between the Iranian government and the United States. This is probably more of what they're saying is a militia. Now, who that militia is who it's backed by. Is it an Iraqi militia? Is it an Iranian-backed militia? Most probably the latter, but we have not seen any confirmation or any claims from the Iranian government thus far about this attack. But, this is yet again another attack on U.S. assets in the region and in Iraq in particular. In the backdrop of Iraqi protests that began up again October 1st, that have claimed the lives of 500 protesters thus far. What are the Iraqi people saying? They're saying, we want our voices to count. We want the U.S. out. We want the Iranian government out. We want free and fair elections that represent us all. And you have to imagine, ever since the toppling of Saddam Hussein and his Sunni majority government, it has been a Shiite majority government, of course, led by the Iranian regime and its representatives in that country. So the Iraqi people are saying, look, we've had this turmoil, we've had the instability, but now let it count for something and let us have our own say and our own vote as to who governs us. And in the midst of all this turmoil, who wins? Well, the insurgencies win. This is how terror groups like ISIS, like Al-Qaeda, like the Iranian government's tentacles grow and prosper in this uncertainty, in these political vacuums that are created all over the Middle East. And when the U.S. and the allies pull out and don't have a presence on the ground, these vacuums are allowed to grow further. So the question always becomes, how involved does the West want to be in these instances? Do we want to stay involved? Do we want to help create that stability? Or is it for the people of the country to create that stability, which proves very difficult and challenging, of course. And that's why we have so many decades of instability in Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria and Libya, and the list goes on. But again, that question of are we helping, are we hurting, and how much of our own assets and blood and treasure can we leave in these places with no positive results. So, again, 500 lives have already been claimed. It doesn't look like those protesters are backing down anytime soon. In the middle of all this, we have another attack on the U.S. Embassy.
Yeah, Voice of America is reporting that Iraq forces are using live rounds on demonstrators, Lisa.
Yes, it looks like they want this to end. And, if they take a page out of the Iranian regime's handbook, it's to go hard against those protesters, to create, a symbolic attack so that you don't want the number of casualties to be too high because you get more protesters to come out, but at the same time you want the protesters to be scared enough to stay home and not come out. So that's exactly what we're seeing with the casualty number being very high for protests that have only been going on for a couple of months, and sporadically. They haven't been as intense every day as we have seen in other places like Iran or like Lebanon. But again, those protesters, they have a case to be made, and they want the world to hear it.
U.S. President Donald Trump was asked if he's willing to lift sanctions on Iran, to which he replied, "No, thank you."
He says it like it is, right? Look, the U.S. has had an interesting role in Iranian foreign affairs, and if you look back at the Obama era, where so much money and billions of dollars were released to the Iranian regime, a contract and a nuclear deal was signed, to which there's no mention of human rights abuses, no mention of money poured into terrorism, no mention of beating down protesters, no mention of incarcerating Western citizens, etc. And still there's reports of an ongoing weapons program. Now you have the Trump administration here in the United States. He was a candidate who ran his entire presidential campaign on pulling out and shredding that Iran nuclear deal, and that's exactly what he did. In May of 2018, he pulled right out of that deal. He said, we'd rather have no deal than a bad deal, and that's exactly what happened. And now we have an exchange of, muscle flexing and chest thumping, and the Iranians are pushing the Europeans to get back into a deal. They at the same time want a nuclear program for themselves, and also want a nuclear deal that they're not going to follow. So this is business as usual for Tehran's regime, and for that reason, President Trump says that the sanctions will remain, and that is the only non-aggressive economic punishment that the West can apply to the Iranian regime, which unfortunately the sanctions are passed down to the people, and President Trump has acknowledged that. He supports the people, he supports the protests, he supports the people of Iran, but the only way to truly punish and to create a situation where the Iranians will come to the table in a way that they will compromise on their nuclear program is to punish them with sanctions that are hopefully directly applied to the people, to the weapons programs, to the technology, to all the sectors that are important to the regime itself.
U.S. President Trump recently had a meeting with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli opposition leader Benny Gantz as he's preparing to release a long-delayed Middle East plan. Tell me more about that.
This is the first time that we're going to hear specifics about the deal that the Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas has rejected wholesalely without even knowing any details. So, already we have a false start because we're not even dealing with a partner who wants to negotiate regardless of the details of that negotiation. But what I'm told by sources inside the White House is that this is the most detailed deal we have ever heard. They've been working on it for 3 years now. This has been spearheaded by a couple of people, but mainly the president's son-in-law and advisor, Jared Kushner. And the deal was preemptively announced as an economic deal in Bahrain months ago, when an economic incentive was presented to the Palestinian people that billions of dollars would be pushed into their economy in the form of jobs and infrastructure and tourism, to which, again, the Palestinian authorities said no way. And now we will hear in more of the political aspects of that deal, meaning a map, meaning lines, meaning perhaps a two-state solution, or maybe even more sovereignty for the Palestinian people than we have seen in the past. But again, we need a committed partner in peace in order to do this. And President Trump announced today, there was a press release that was released right after the meeting between Bibi and President Trump, saying that the secret or the recipe to peace in the Middle East will be through this deal between the Palestinians and Israelis. And that is why this White House and this president has been so set on presenting a deal that will perhaps be palatable by both sides. So we shall see the reaction from the Israeli side, from the Palestinian side, and see if we can move forward with this deal.
Lisa, we only have a few short moments left here, but in Mali, militants on motorbikes killed 20 troops. 20 Mali soldiers were attacked at an army camp by gunmen.
Yes, it's not talked about much in the mainstream media, but you have ISIS and Al Qaeda both on the ground in Mali, and you have casualties like this happening every single day in the form of terror attacks on civilians. And these were actually policemen that died in this attack. But we've reported before at the Foreign Desk on attacks on civilians in Mali every single day. There are attacks in the African continent that are not talked about. When we talk about terrorism, we mainly focus on the Middle East, perhaps North Africa, but deep into the African continent, they have made their way through and they have created these terror cells. And there has to be more of a focus on the presence of these terror organizations in that continent, because when they gain that momentum, when they gain that political clout, that is when they set up these headquarters and are able to launch attacks all over the world just from these terror cells. So very important story to follow, an important place to follow with regards to the growth of ISIS and Al Qaeda both.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thanks so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks again for watching.